All right, so there you see our panel of CXOs. Feel free to take some photos. We're going to try to get lots of information from them over the course of the next roughly, well, a little bit less than an hour or so. I have a lot of questions here. Hopefully some of you have got some questions as well. We will have microphones roaming around later. You know, to have questions for each other too. I want to keep this as kind of a discussion. So I'm going to wander away from the mics here, and my mic works, great. So I want to talk first with a very sort of general question about consumer demand. I mean, I got a chance to sort of pontificate about my thoughts on consumers and how they're dealing with all of this stuff. But I want to ask each of you, how is the consumer demand shaping the future telco business model?
Good morning, everyone. Well, when I look at consumer demand, when I go back to when I was a kid, the phone, there was no broadband, of course. And, the phone was something where my parents said, don't use it too often because it's quite expensive, especially if you call your relatives in the US. Careful.
It's like turning off the water or something,
yeah,
leave the lights on.
Exactly. Yeah. Just ring, and ring twice and then hang up because then they know you're okay. So this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And this is unthinkable today. Today, the services that we as telecom operators provide are an essential part of people's, digital lives, be it business, be it private. So if it doesn't work, they notice immediately and they complain very loudly, be it on Twitter or wherever. So I think for me, the most important element is what we provide is essential. And if you ask somebody, who complains about his phone bill, say, okay, fine, let me take away your phone or your smartphone. Let me take it away for a week so that really hurts, to your point before. And then ask me, I will ask you, how much are you willing to pay me to give it back to you? I'm pretty sure most of us would pay more than they're paying today. So I think what this shows is that as an industry, we complain a lot about, our revenues being flat and so on and so forth. We have a monetization issue. We don't have a demand issue. What we provide as operators is essential to people's lives.
I agree with that. For me, I've spent the last 7 years in India and Africa and only the last 90 days in the Middle East. And I remember what used to happen to me was when I would fly back from India or Africa back to London, where my family home was, I would see these two worlds. And the first world was that in London, you were using applications on smartphones, you were booking taxis, you were ordering stuff online, stuff was being delivered to your home. And then you would fly back to India and Africa, and what people were worried about there was, could they make a phone call and was it affordable? So for me, now transitioning to the Middle East, it's extraordinary, the consumer demand. For the first time ever, I saw in the Pearl in Doha, an 8-member family sitting at lunch with all 8 of them with a smartphone, doing exactly what you said, Daniel, which was not communicating with each other, but were using their smartphone for something. So from my perspective now, the challenge with consumer demand is that people's expectations are incredibly high with networks, so it's super availability, because on voice, people were a little bit more tolerant than they are with data because it's always on. And then secondly, people don't particularly want to pay very much for this huge consumption of data. So I think for us as operators is, how do you provide high availability bandwidth in a world where people are not expecting to pay you very much for that?
Interesting. Ulaiyan?
Okay, the way I look at it is from two folds. The first fold is related to the consumers, individuals, and that's where they start demanding to have more devices, smart devices, and more multi-screening kind of experience. And that put a lot of weight on the agenda of operators to invest more in order to provide backbone and capacities. It also pushed the operators to make sure that they are always on, as we just said and Daniel just mentioned. They will not anymore make operators go away with the kind of experience that is okay. They still want the high standard connectivity to make them always on, and their intimate times and their meeting times and wherever they are. And that's a bit demanding from operator point of view. From business point of view, that's the other angle. I think the formula is a bit different. I think business is requiring a lot of quality of service that is at a high standard. They demand all the kind of redundancies for their backups to be and their connectivities to be as bulletproof as it can be, to make sure that they run their own businesses in a very efficient way. It is from two different angles, wherever you want to look at it. But at the end, I think it's putting a lot of pressure on operators to make sure that the backbone is there and it is at a very high standard level of quality of service.
Rashid?
Yeah, I think in the old days, especially from at least my generation, understanding the customer or the consumer requirement was a lot easier by the telecom operators. All you need to know there and then, he's calling from A to B, and where is this B? And you try to provide the best service, especially international calls and so on. So it was easy to understand the demand, whether it's data communication or in the voice side. Now, as we know, I think we have no doubt that the future of our industry is very much going into the broadband. Now, there is a big culture change within the organization need to take place to understand the use rather than the subscriber or the customer. And you need to understand more, where does he go, what he uses this broadband for, the bytes for. So for us, the biggest challenge is to understand usage rather than subscriptions or voice calls in minutes. And that is the biggest challenge for us now. I do not think we know as a telecom operator yet our customer very well when it comes to broadband. We need to do a lot more, have more tools in our telecom or our network. People mindset need to change internally as well. That's the biggest challenge we have, especially now. I think we are all squeezed when it comes to ARPUs. Market is saturated. We need to extract the extra dollars out of the customer. So you have to follow him, where exactly his interest is. Where does he sneak out at night to watch or communicate or chat with? So you need to understand a lot more than the early days of simple customer segmentation based on industry or gender or age or whatever. Now we're talking about segmenting the customer and usage and the interest. So that's, we believe, the future of our industry, and we need to do a lot more on that if we need to maintain our success.
Jean-Francois?
Yes. What surprised me the most when I arrived in Jordan 1 year ago is the Jordanian society is really pyramid, right? With top people and the base were a very different way of living. But when we come to telecom usage, in fact, everybody wants to be equal. I mean, everybody wants to access this world. And apart from all what I heard, what I think I agree totally, is that we need to find ways to produce low-cost services that and this is a paradox, that has the same quality and the same affordability than the one that we provide to the top of the pyramid. So the demand is there. People are ready to pay for it, but the equation is sometimes complicated, challenging.
So if I'm hearing all of you correctly, it sounds like the demand is increasing.
Even though we say voice is this commodity thing that will go away, if I look at our revenue mix today, it's still almost half of it is coming from voice. And so I think we are well wise to not just look after all the new stuff, the fancy stuff, as an operator, I mean, from a profitability perspective, but also to make sure that we can preserve the value in the voice business for as long as we can and for as much as we can. Because if that high margin revenue goes away quickly, it's quite difficult because all the new services tend to have lower gross margins, lower profitability. So if you have to replace a large chunk of high margin voice revenue with all these new services that are growing but have a lower gross margin, the financial equation is not going to work. So, that's the way I would look at it. Prepare the future, but don't forget about where we're coming from.
Amer? Yep.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, right now the challenge for us is to look at the profitability across the basket of services. You have services like, take an example, the SMS, the short messaging. That uses the cheapest form of network, you're signaling SS7 network, which gives you the highest margin and it was on demand. It has been declining across the region, at least this region. Ours is down 38% from last year alone, but it's been increasing for a couple of years. So when you try and compensate for that revenue, looking at the basket, the single service that is growing is broadband, and broadband on the move. That's mobile broadband, which is the most expensive form of service. So your margins are being squeezed. And as you go along, you develop usage patterns that we talked about that are becoming more and more green. I love your presentation, by the way. No one is reading, diving on broadband right now.
Right.
So I hope you start moving.
They're binging.
They want broadband, and they want broadband everywhere, and that is very expensive to avail and have available everywhere. And the challenge is now to maintain, at least to use the assets. A lot of the assets that are providing legacy services may become non-performing assets. So you continue to use your assets that used to make a lot of money for you and get some money from them by basically rebalancing the tariffs and making it more cheaper, more available, a cheaper alternative. And I really like the point about the fact that yes, the permanent is there in terms of affordability, but the demand is the same. In fact, perhaps there is more demand for broadband and mobility because rich guys are too busy to be on the broadband all the time. So you really get the base wanting that same broadband experience without having to pay for it.
Anyone else want to jump in, Kyle? Yeah.
Perhaps one segment which will change significantly is business segments. A lot of our companies are built around consumer demand for products. But I think particularly in the Middle East, the demand and consumption of mobility and fixed products in businesses will change, and I see a lot of large corporates coming to the region. I see them being much more demanding around what they will expect in connectivity. And then I think the next wave after that, you'll begin to see smaller companies who begin to provide the ecosystem for larger companies. And small companies go straight to the bank for funding, and then they secondly go to a telecoms company for their infrastructure. So I think that's where the demand is beginning to build as well.
This region is yet to see where data revenues will dominate the mix. We are still looking at voice dominating our revenue streams, and yes, data is growing, but it's astonishing when you see the traffic that is almost 2, 3, 4, 5 times than what it used to be last year, but yet your revenues from that stream is not really growing as much as that demand is hitting you. That makes operators start thinking of rationalizing how that network is being utilized, and maybe try to sweat that asset in a better way, and maybe get an upside, hopefully, out of their broadband offering. All the new 4G broadband networks it is coming already at a premium from rollout point of view. And I think this is where operators has to be very careful on their pricing schemes of LTE, and hopefully get an upside out of it. Because if you start just applying the same pricing models that used to be provided on 3G, for example, you will end up losing big time on your rollout efforts. And simply the business case cannot take it further, cannot really accommodate all of this big demand on capacities that is not really showing a return on investments properly.
And Rashid, what's driving LTE adoption?
Before I start that,
Yeah.
I think I tend to agree that for the telecom operator, the voice is still the dominant. I think realistically, more than 60% of our revenue comes from voice. However, a lot of that is very much based on roaming and international when it comes to mobile. But we all know it cannot last that long. Internet roaming is still, I believe, a big chunk of our revenue comes from internet roaming. It's under tremendous pressure from regulator to make it cost-oriented. I think that cannot be milked for a long time. So we will be more and more depending on having more broadband or getting more dollars out of the broadband, basically. So this is something we believe in the next 3 to 4 years, broadband will contribute the biggest on our revenue. We have a lot of hopes on LTE, for example. We launched LTE in obviously over the last only few months experience we have in Bahrain. We notice slight difference in behavior. Obviously, their consumptions of broadband is a lot faster. They run out of their threshold a lot faster, almost half the time of, I would say, the usage of 3G. We're beginning to see interest from the enterprise market to use LTE application. This is another big thing, hopefully, I think we're going to rely on. Because so far, I believe the enterprise has not paid any attention to the mobile infrastructure. There's still preferences to go on the fixed and fiber. And they feel more reliable, they feel more reliance and committed bit rates. I think with improvement and a grade of service in the LTE, and I think the enterprise market will pick up in a big way in this region, whether as a backup or even as a primary application of their requirements. So it's still a bit early stage. They don't have that much faith, I believe, on using mobile as the primary route of banking, for example. But I think this is going to come, and we hope that such opportunities will compensate from a lot of loss of the voice traffic or voice revenue over the next few years.
Sure.
I think we all went for bundles, right? Trying to mix up minutes, SMS, mega, gigabytes of data. My concern is maybe we went too far, at least in Jordan, in price reduction. We could have been more careful, and I think it wouldn't have changed that much the whole picture if our price were just 20% higher, and we would be very more comfortable in preparing for the future and investing. So I would say we are a bit in the so far so good, but for instance, the LTE equation in Jordan, we try to look at it in many different ways. It doesn't fly for the time being. This is challenging and matter of concern.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Just a thought that came to mind when I listened to what the panelists here said. Talking a lot about data. What worries me, and I think all operators should take this as a wake-up call, is when you go on various countries in Europe, and probably also increasingly in this region, you go to the Apple website, and you want to order and configure an iPad, which is for many people the way to access mobile data. So, you can very nice website, very well done, good customer interface. You configure your iPad, and then at the end, there's a button where you can click, so do I want to have operator A, B, or C to provide me the connectivity for my iPad? I think that's really dangerous. I think on the data side, the operators, if we don't pay attention, we are losing the direct interface to our customer, and we let Apple and other device manufacturers take that. And if you ask yourself, why is that? The online experience that you have with an Apple, or also the store experience you have with an Apple, is 10 times better than the store or online experience you have with telecom operators, including our own. So this is not about us saying others have to do better. I think we need to be very, very careful and very mindful and much more innovative in the way we structure our online and our offline customer experience, not to lose the link.
And how much of that is perhaps confusion on the part of the consumer because they're traveling more, they're sort of an international mind, they're not sure how does this work carrier to carrier, country to country?
No, sure. I mean, when it comes to roaming, I agree with you. But usually, I mean, not most, but some people at least buy their devices in their home market, and there they should actually have a relationship with the operator if things go well. So I just think a lot of what we see here and what we complain about is quite frankly self-inflicted pain.
We should be really careful that the only touch point with the customer in the end, if we don't do something about it now, will be the fact that we are the people who send them the bill. Yeah, and right now, the over-the-top players, and I'm sorry talking about Google here, say YouTube is, if you look at the infotainment mix in this region, and I'm sure operators from the region will agree, there is more towards the entertainment than the information.
I've listened to Vodafone be in agony globally about this for 10 years now, and my argument's always been if someone wants to use WhatsApp, then our job is to make the WhatsApp experience as good as it can be, because that's what consumer demand is. I've seen the argument for 10 years about walled gardens on the internet. Customers don't think like that. Customers think, I want to access this site, and someone's going to be able to do that for me. So I think you have to embrace, would be my thinking. The question is then you cannot monetize that, and that's a challenge for the operator.
I see the others preparing to say something.
I think, if you allow me, Rashid, I think it's different models will apply on different OTT players, and I think some of them are dealt with through regulatory frameworks, where we have got that shield not to get affected by their offerings, more or less. But that will not last for long. I think some of the, especially on the regions, some of the applications are pushed back from regulatory bodies for a reason or another. But as an offering perspective and from operators' perspective, I think it's an international thing that is happening whether we like it or not. And I think the best way to, rather than to challenge that and start saying, okay, we will stand up and maybe fight the Googles and the likes, rather than that, maybe have some kind of partnerships where you start building on experience-based kind of offerings that gives access to those kind of OTT players through your network, where your customers can somehow pay you a little bit of a premium to access these kind of services. Back to the example of YouTube, for example. A lot of customers will be very much interested in an add-on, let's say, to give them YouTube access, for example, throughout the month, or to guarantee their social media access throughout the month, rather than having to be cut down at the middle of the month if they are on LTE network that is consumed on 10th of the month maybe, and they will be disconnected. So having these innovative ways of maybe getting use of that appetite from consumers towards the international providers of content, and maybe making them pay for it as long as they want to.
Thank you. It's Christian Kern from JP Morgan. Appreciate the high-level discussions we have. I'm wearing a hat as a consumer today, and I'm highly dissatisfied with the customer service offerings in the region. Just wanted to see what the thinking of the CXOs is on this topic, because at the end you put a lot of infrastructure into place, but to really sell it to people in terms of information, what is the distance to the next local exchange, what broadband speed can I really get, or am I just sold a service at 100 megabyte per minute, which I pay for but I never can utilize. So this would be my question.
Well, first of all, I agree. The very simple answer is I agree. I think we have done wonders on the infrastructure side, but we haven't fully kept up yet on the customer interface, and I think I alluded that multiple times, whether that's the online experience, the shop experience, the responsiveness, that's where we have to put in a lot of work. That's what we're currently doing, and I'm hoping that you see, maybe not the perfect state yet, but the clear improvement over the last 12 months happening here in this country as far as the customer interface of Etisalat is concerned, and there's more work to do, and we have rolled up our sleeves and we continue working on it.
Do we have time for one more question?
Today I've just heard some very promising concepts about the partnerships. Rashid, you were talking about establishing a coalition of partnerships and possibly the GSMA being one of those that would help you create a single voice to allow then the over-the-top providers have a single entry point with which to negotiate with you. But the last question generated something that I thought was rather alarming. The mobile-to-mobile or the machine-to-machine marketplace in the future, there was a comment about that it might in fact be SIM-based, which was rather interesting in that would you believe that that someone's home refrigerator would have a SIM in it as opposed to just an IP address, and that be serviced by maybe a home appliance that would talk to all the devices? The machine-to-machine interface would be through another broker, basically providing another over-the-top provider that you'd have to negotiate with. So I'd be just kind of interested to hear your comments on how you believe that you were going to participate kind of on where you're turning machines into subscribers, and what's driving that kind of thinking?
I think machine-to-machine in the future is going to be about applications, and I think there's going to be two big areas, which is health and education, where the application will be the driver of the machine-to-machine activity rather than just the physical SIM. So I think a couple of people said that vehicle tracking is fairly straightforward with a SIM, but actually in a BMW now, the heart of the car comes from the ability to extract information, deliver content to the car that helps the driver, helps insurance companies assess how good you are. So I feel very optimistic that the future will be about the application sitting on top of the service rather than the service itself.
Well,
the SIM is primarily, but if you can find another way of authentication, the user login, so to speak, then it doesn't have to be the SIM. I think because of at least for the region, because of the dominance of the entertainment part, smart TVs are going to be, really the next thing, but it's going to be over Wi-Fi in the homes, and they don't have SIMs. They just use Wi-Fi, and then you have a dynamic IP address.
All right, part of my job as moderator is to moderate things as much as I would like to continue this conversation. I want to thank our panel for what I feel like was some really candid and insightful comments this morning, so if we can all give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.